Colonel Vindman, I want to start with you. The brutality, the unsparing nature of intentionally bombing a theater where women and children are inside, or at least knowingly do so. It feels like it's the juncture at which this is the feature of the Russian war in Ukraine, not a bug. Is that fair?
It is. In fact, Russian armed forces have been notorious for striking hospitals, schools, theaters. This is unfortunately what I refer to as morale targets, that they're looking to crush the spirit of the Ukrainian people and their will to resist. This is the way that the Russians fight their war. From their standpoint, there's a logic to it. The logic is war, a prolonged war is more disastrous than a short, sharp war. So from them going to these extreme lengths, we don't recognize, it just is so out of context for us in the West that we wouldn't think about striking, we do this accidentally, maybe collateral damage, but we wouldn't go after these civilian targets. So, but for the Russians, this is exactly the way they fight. And unfortunately, this is going to be a feature of the rest of Russia's war in Ukraine.
Colonel Vindman, it is for the U.S. State Department. We heard from Secretary of State Blinken. We've heard from the CIA director, the DIA director, and others that this intelligence about Russia and chemical weapons is part of what has so far been a successful strategy of outing the Russian plans to try to throw them off key. That said, you have to look at how much we knew about the plan to invade, and we didn't forestall that. How are we to process constantly talking about this intelligence that suggests that the Russians may be dangling loose language about chemical weapons in Ukraine as a pretext for their own chemical weapon attack in that country?
So I think the Russians' objectives here are really to intimidate the population in Ukraine, the Ukrainian leadership, to compel them to capitulate, as well as to signal to the U.S. that unless it plays a constructive role in putting pressure on Ukraine to end this war, that it could go into the direction of weapons of mass destruction. In reality, I think this is the same policy of exposing Russia's provocations to close off those as legitimate, deniable activities by the Russian government when they undertake some of these types of attacks. I think, unfortunately, that's not going to. We didn't forestall a war, as you pointed out. It's not going to forestall a chemical strike if the Russians choose to go in that direction. I think we need to do something much more robust, and we need to signal that this would be an escalation that could, frankly, compel NATO and the West to establish a no-fly zone or to strike Russian targets responsible for these chemical weapons, kind of similar to what the previous administration did. It's not going to be enough to just kind of expose the Russian wrongdoing. And we need to recognize that this is not provocative towards a broader world war or a broader confrontation between Russia and NATO. This could be just indicating that we are serious. This is a threshold that we can't tolerate. Countries employing biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons against other countries, especially in this case with Russia, by agreement by the Budapest Memorandum when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. Russia was supposed to be a guarantor of its security, guarantor that weapons of mass destruction wouldn't be used against Ukraine. There's a lot of basis for us to take this kind of action and not have this automatically spiral into a broader confrontation. We need to be signaling that, and we need to hold the line. It's establishing a red line, but it's establishing a realistic red line that we should not allow to pass uncontested.
Colonel Vindman, let me show you. My colleague Lester Holt put these questions to President Zelensky in an interview yesterday. Let me show you some of his answers on these topics.
The U.S. administration has raised concerns that Russia might launch a chemical attack. Do you think that would be a red line that the U.S. would move forward and become more actively involved in combat?
If they're launching intentionally those missiles against kindergartens, against schools, universities, now that is a cross of every single line. What else should we wait for?
I just like to be cautious when, and I know you are more cautious and thoughtful than just about anyone, Colonel Vindman, but For our consumption, talking about red lines when, as the president said, babies are being targeted, children are dying, and as Cal Perry reported at the beginning of the week, not just from bombs, from dehydration, from starvation. What concerns you, or what counsel do you have as sort of the West engages in, what the definition of a red line is and is not?
Yeah, I think there's still some wishful thinking about how this unfolds. We haven't caught up with the reality that this is headed to a protracted war in which the Ukrainians continue to resist, continue to destroy large portions of the Russian military, and Russia is going to be backed into a corner to take more escalatory action. We're still in this mindset that it's going to continue on the way we see it right now for the future. We're not looking deeper. This is frankly been one area of criticism for me, is that we're too short-sighted, that our approach to supporting Ukraine is too incremental. We should be giving these systems that we're now offering in the last 24 hours, those are excellent. Those are exactly what the Ukrainians need, but they need more. They need more capable systems. And we're going to get to the point where we're going to open up the floodgates, but it's going to take another catastrophe before we get there. So I think we just need to be more thoughtful. We just need to be more thoughtful about how this is going to unfold based on what we know right now, and take more courageous, risk-informed actions that, again, are not provocative, but are metered to understand that the Russians are not suicidal. They don't want a broader war with NATO when they already are having such a hard time with Ukraine.